it's not about the inside. The inside is great. It's like an X-ray, but it's about the therapy which the organization has to take to cure and thus realize value. And ultimately, our mission is to realize value or help organizations to realize value.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process. Welcome to the next episode of Process Pioneers. My name is Daniel Rayner. I'm the host of Process Pioneers, and in each of these episodes, I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with process practitioners. Now, if you're from the process world, you would know that it's very broad, very diverse. There's many different areas, many different organizations tackling this topic of managing, understanding, and improving your business processes. And so that's why we created this series. And to date, I think we've cracked the 150 episode mark. We're about up to episode 155, I think it is. And if you have been listening or following along for some time, we would appreciate a rating and a review. I think we just cracked 50,000 listens across those episodes, across all of the different platforms. So the word is spreading. People are gaining value from this podcast series, and you can help us out by spreading it even further by giving us a rating and review and sharing it with your friends and your colleagues. But in today's conversation, I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with Lars Reinkemeyer. Now, Lars is the leading organizational transformation at Celonis, and he advises large organizations on their process mining journeys to drive impact and action, works with some very large organizations across the world. And this is going to be a very interesting conversation because I know a lot of our audience, a lot of you guys that are listening, you ask me questions like, how is process mining being put into practice? Where is it delivering real, tangible, commercial value to an organization? We've all heard about it now. It's quite popular. There's a lot of popularity and lots of buzz around it. But which organizations are actually deriving real, tangible value from process mining? And so this conversation, we're going to dive into all of that. So Lars, thank you so much for joining me.
Daniel, thank you, and good morning from Munich. Good afternoon to Down Under. All a real pleasure here and honor to be in this show. Amazing, 50,000 listeners, 150 episodes, and a great lineup of celebrities and speakers. And this seems to be becoming the Larry King show of process mining. So I'm really excited and honored to be part of that show.
That's amazing. I received that slogan or that catchphrase there. Maybe I should have that on each of our episodes. But I know that even though you're not down under now, I know that you have been down under, and that was part of your original journey or part of your story when it comes to process mining. So maybe you can take us on a bit of a journey leading back to where maybe you first got introduced to this whole world of process management, and then take us on a bit of a journey leading up to what you're doing today.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, Daniel, back end of last millennium, I had the great pleasure to spend a couple of years with Siemens in Down Under. And this was about, best of time of my life somehow. I enjoyed that time, was in Melbourne and Sydney. And one of the first things which people from Down Under told me is that they are fed up, of being Down Under. They were fed up of being, always shown on the bottom right side here of the global map. They said, hey, I mean, this is just a pure question of perspective. Why don't you turn the world around and have a different perspective? Saying, hey, we are up there on the world, we are on the other side. We don't want to be down under. And I felt like, well, it's a fair request. It's a fair point they're making of having different perspectives. And that for me was quite an amazing insight, saying it's different perspectives you can take at things. And then during my time there at Siemens, we started with business process modeling, which I feel like is a great way of standardizing and having a common denominator for anything you're looking at. Not like saying everybody, well, my process looks like this and my product looks like that, and everybody's saying, hey, I'll get my different views here. But using business process modeling as a common denominator where you define the standards, how things are supposed to be. I felt, wow, that's great. That's amazing. So we did a lot of work there with BPM to define the processes, how things for Siemens are supposed to come into the country and to be shipped to the customer and all those things. And I enjoyed that time. But to be honest, at a later stage, then when I was back with Siemens in Munich, I felt like, well, it's good to shape that kind of perspective, like the kind of 10 commandments saying this is how the things are supposed to be, but reality looks different. And that's what led me towards becoming passionate about process mining, which is more about how things actually flow and get that kind of insight on the real actions and then see what you can do with that.
I think that's a really interesting point there, or a really interesting journey, I should say. Someone that has come from that process modeling and maybe that traditional BPM, organizing workshop sessions where everyone comes in and we discuss the process. What do we think the process is? What's your perspective of the process? What's your perspective on the process? To now being very much involved in the process mining side of things. How do process practitioners these days, how do they tackle this, I guess, constantly evolving landscape where traditional BPM is evolving and it's changing because we're getting supported by technology that makes it us easier to do, I guess, the original purpose of our role. How do you find process practitioners are evolving and are adapting to this change, or do you find that there is a bit of resistance there in terms of, process mining? It's more for the data people, it's more for the data analysts. It's what's your experience been like there?
Well, my initial experience when I started Siemens 2014 was process mining. I was blown away by the possibilities of having a high resolution X-ray of the actual way how processes go. And we started logistics, building full transparencies on supply chains across different systems, across different units. And then I went back to the process mining, the process modeling community at Siemens, which by that time, 2014, 2015, were a couple of thousand people at Siemens, very addicted to BPM, working with software AG, ARIS, modeling processes, and all kind of different levels and thus defining processes. And I went back to the community and put a lot of effort in trying to say, hey, why can't we complement your process models with the actual view on the how things are really happening? Why can't we show you, as you have defined the procurement process or the customer order process, how things actually go in our infrastructure, in our systems, and across the end-to-end process. And put a lot of effort into building that kind of transparency, complementing the insight of process modeling with process mining data, providing conformance checking possibilities, where I uploaded the process models from the BPM community to say, okay, and now these are non-conforming activities which are happening in real life. Since you've defined the process to be in that form, and in reality, the people in Siemens, they do it in different ways. So there is non-conformance, which might be acceptable, which might be not acceptable. So put a lot of effort in that. And to be honest, at least at Siemens, I felt I failed, since we never got to a point to rock the bottom line of Siemens in the sense of driving actual impact in the way how people would act on the processes. And that's why at a certain point in time at Siemens, I turned more towards the people in charge of the functions. So the head of procurement, head of sales, head of logistics, to understand, okay, what are their pain points and what can I do to support those people and essentially rock the bottom line of Siemens with some real value and impact, tangible impact, But back to your question, I don't want to say that in general, the BPM community is not leveraging the benefits of what process mining does. I think what I've seen there with many discussions, there's a lot of smart people building, extending the BPM knowledge and capabilities with process mining and saying, okay, this gives me real insight, allows me really to see what's happening then, and also expand my target group, which I have in my company here, beyond the process modeling and data quality and documentation towards actually influencing how the daily work is happening and steering where there's deviation from the standards and thus having impact on the actual way how an organization works. So I think there's many people who definitely combine the best of both worlds, BPM and process mining.
Yeah. And you would say that is the future, having a combined role where it's not like you've got a separate traditional BPM community and then a process mining community, but it all should come under the same banner, under the same resources that are capable in both.
Absolutely. I think it's definitely combining the best of both worlds, and just a couple of weeks ago, I had an opportunity to speak at a MBA program up on innovation from Jan van der Broeke, where also we spoke about, both worlds here and saying, how does it combine? How does it build on each other? How does it complement each other? And this is, I think, where it's leading to. I mean, to be honest, from my side, I learned in my years at Siemens to take a very strong focus on the operational business users. So in my role here at Celonis now, I'm exclusively focusing on those people who are in charge of making sure that daily operations, daily processes are smooth, efficient, and as performant as they can be. In that respect, process mining is like a daily or almost real-time screening of what's happening, what's going wrong, and then allowing the organization to take action. And for me, while the one part is the insight and discovery, saying, let me understand how processes go, this for me is not so much the focus. For me, the focus is much more on saying, what kind of action can I derive? What can I get the organization to learn from something which is going wrong and do things different? So what specifically does it mean? I mean, Siemens, one of the use cases which we deployed there is looking into the way how customer orders are processed, order to cash, the order to cash process. And in BPM, probably you would define the process saying, okay, this is the way how a customer order is going through an organization at Siemens. With process mining, we looked at the global, looked at more than 30 million items ordered per year across more than 40 systems, across more than 170 countries. And the discovery showed us we have more than 900,000 different ways how a customer order can go through the organization. 900,000 different process variants, and this is nothing exceptional. We have customers which come up with millions, more than 1 million of different process variants, which we discover. And then obviously the question is, so what? What do you do with that? Is the ambition now to say, hey, let's standardize all that to one standard process? Which for me is not a meaningful purpose. Since if I look at a company like Siemens, the intention is to say, what is the biggest value driver? How can I realize value based on that insight? And how can I ensure process efficiency? So what we did is that we established a program sponsored by the CFO, which gave the mission of saying, I want to automate the way how customer orders are processed. And I want to drive efficiency across order processing. And we defined simple KPIs like a digital fit rate and touch rate and automation rate. And then we guided the global organization based on the insight to work on a daily basis on avoiding process inefficiencies, like duplicate payment, late shipments, manual touches, whatever you have it there. And within 1 year, we eliminated 10 million manual touches. So we had a tangible impact, which was measured based on a daily reporting of process mining across a global organization, with the CFO as a sponsor, the country managers, the operational people. So we had a true impact where action was instructed, and then we measured the value with 10 million less manual touches. And this is all about where I'm focusing on, saying it's not about the insight. The insight is great. It's like an X-ray, but it's about the therapy which the organization has to take to cure and thus realize value. And ultimately, our mission is to realize value or help organizations to realize value based on understanding what's going wrong, helping them to do it better, and then showing that this has impact and value.
And I'd imagine that value, that's the potential there or possible there for an organization. It does vary depending on the organization, the strategic objectives, the strategic goals. What would you say are the main drivers for an organization wanting to adopt process mining? What really, I guess, kickstarts that conversation and the senior leaders say, we need process mining because we need to understand this stuff better?
Yeah. In my experience, and with more than 2,000 customer deployments, there's different, companies have different approaches, and in many cases, we're seeing that there are people who are passionate about process management, maybe coming from BPM and then saying process mining gives me a great lever here. I call them the process mining aficionados, who are passionate about saying, hey, this is cool. Let me do this and let me build on that and let me see what I can do. And then knock on doors on the organization to see how can I get attention and drive impact and value. And to be honest, this is great, this is good, but it doesn't scale. It doesn't, have a big impact again on the bottom line of the organization. So typically our approach is to come from a value advisory perspective. So our approach, which we're taking, is saying, looking at an organization and then approaching senior executives, senior management, saying, well, with your mission of digital transformation, we can allow you to make it tangible. We can allow you to make it measurable. We can allow you to guide it, to drive it across a global organization based on facts and data. And this is where we see the biggest successes across our customers, where we have customers with a sponsor, like, for example, Cardinal Health in the US, where the CEO, Mike Kaufman, is a strong sponsor, and he's saying, I need to transform my organization. And in order to make that, I leverage process mining, I leverage Celonis, since it's not only about PowerPoint and global transformation, but it's also about data and fact-based. So he, as a sponsor, gives a clear guidance to his organization saying, we need to drive process efficiency and transform the way how we're working. And process mining is the X-ray, is the insight, is the foundation, which then allows targeted action. And they have realized more than $100 million of value based on the insight they got, and then taking measures and action just to improve the process efficiency. So I think to your question there, the approach in an organization is getting the right executive sponsor, connecting to a strategic target, and then getting the organization to focus on that target and work and have tangible, measurable impact and benefits.
Yeah, great. And I think, obviously, there is a lot of potential there for organizations when adopting process mining. I also think that there are a lot of organizations that don't understand that potential and don't understand what's possible. And they might have heard of process mining, but what does it actually mean for our organization? What would you say are the biggest myths out there that stop organizations from embarking on that process mining journey? Would you say that there are a few common myths or preconceptions or roadblocks or hurdles that an organization may think they have that stops them from pulling the trigger?
Well, first of all, I think what we're seeing typically is that organizations, they start with reluctance, resistance, saying, oh, this is just, another technology and I've modeled my processes, so my world should be in order. And to be honest, I've seen that so often, these surprising faces, when we started with process mining, we did the Process Explorer to show people from procurement, sales, finance, how the process actually go. They were blown away, since initially they felt like, well, I've modeled my processes, I've defined my world, so that should be all clear and easy. And when we showed them, well, but the real way how your process is working here, and did you know that you have 15 approval steps for buying a mouse worth of $5? They were blown away, saying, no, this cannot be true, So this was the first where people were just amazed. Then turning that into action again requires a right mindset with those people in charge of processes. Since I was surprised the first 1-2 years, I did a lot of process explorers and showing people the real way how processes are going. And then very often nothing happened. And I felt like, hey, what I'm doing wrong, And then I realized that some of the people, they are just resistant to change. They're saying, well, I'm comfortable with the way my organization is working here. I have so many other things. I have so many other changes. I don't want to disrupt my organization with that topic here, So it is getting the right people with the right mindset who are open to change, who are open to say, oh yeah, this is the next step. This allows me to have a fact-based change and transformation of my processes. That's what I want to drive. So you have to find the right people with the right mindset who are passionate about that topic. Then obviously, it's process mining. It's not like plug and play. It's not like you just deploy it and you get your X-ray very easily. So it takes some time to get access to the right data, get the event logs. And obviously their technology has made some evolution in the respect of having standard extractors, which are, if your system is not customized, kind of plug and play, but still you need to get the data access, the access to the source system and prepare the data, So that's where you need to have the right support. And also my advice is always to focus on simple, quick win use cases, like focus on one use case, like looking at duplicate payment, late shipments, where very quick and easy you can get the data, the event logs, which you need for process mining to visualize the actual process flows, and then have an entity work on that and realize value. Since the important part is to have a proof of value very quickly, have some good success stories very quickly where you can show and say, hey, this is where process mining has allowed us to save a couple of millions by identifying duplicate payments and avoiding duplicate payments, or looking at payment term deviations between purchase orders, order confirmations, and then have some quick success stories, which gives the organization more appetite to scale bold and get more people attracted, saying, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And I have a lot of ideas then for my own organization here on my own part to use it also for certain distinct use cases and scale it from there. So I think it is about finding the right people there, getting the right use cases in place, having a focused approach. And this is where those companies which embark with process mining and have some good successes, where they are very focused on those factors and scale big from there.
Yeah, no, that's great. And when you think about, we've got a broad audience that are listening to this, that they come from a wide background, many different organizations. Can you describe to us who what the ideal profile is of the perfect profile would be of an ideal candidate or an ideal organization for process mining? I don't know whether that's by the size of the company or the revenue or the sector or the industry. Are you able to describe to us what the ideal candidate for process mining is?
Well, I mean, process mining, the bigger the better. That's the first statement. So the larger the organization, the more process complexity and inefficiencies they will have, and the more value they can yield with process mining. And last year we did a campaign in North America where we promised to every organization with more than $2 billion of revenue that we would identify in excess of $10 million of value, which can be realized with process mining by identifying process inefficiencies and improving that. And we had a large number of companies, who challenged us on that. And we promised that we would give a donation of, I think it was $100,000 in case we would not be able to prove that value potential, And I think there was only one case, one company where since they were highly automated, where we didn't get to the 10 million of value potential, which we identified, so we had only one donation, which we had to do. So in large companies, it's quite amazing what you find there as actual process inefficiencies. I mean, always blown away. We have some American companies which have, due to their system complexities, millions of duplicate payments, which they're not aware of, which you'd say, hey, how can that be? And unreal, but it's just the way how the organization is working, how the organization has grown. And that's where process mining is so powerful to get that transparency and then have the organization identify those inefficiencies, work on that, and realize that value. So, and that applies for large companies. And I mean, if you have a small company, process mining might be a bit of a cannon shooting at a small bird or just oversized. I mean, but we have also quite a number of mid-sized companies which are using process mining to understand their overall process, for supply chain or across the whole value chain of that organization, just to go through how the whole organization is working, and identifying inefficiencies there. So, but in essence, to your question, I think it's nothing to do with industries. It's cross-industry, it's across the globe, but definitely the larger the organization, the more complex the actual processes are, the more benefit and value you're going to find with process mining by just allowing, based on big data, to screen the actual way how the organization works, identifying inefficiencies, and then, and again, which is the most important part, enabling the organization to work on that and drive impact and realize value.
Right, great. And are you able to give us an idea of those organizations that were $2 billion, that's revenue or more? Is that the case?
Yeah, that's $2 billion of revenue. That's where we just said as a common denominator, saying any organization with $2 billion of revenue would have huge potentials in certain core processes like procurement, like sales, like supply chain. And that's where we focus on.
Do you have any examples from that sort of all of those experiences where you can, I guess, maybe give us a bit more specific detail around, I guess, kind of like that example you gave us before, where that organization saved $100 million or something like that? Do you have examples from that experience? What sort of processes were identified or focused on, and what were the efficiency opportunities that were uncovered there?
Yeah, I mean, typically, the majority of our customers, they would start with procurement and order management. So they would start with purchase to pay as a standard process to look at. And in purchase to pay, then look into distinct use cases like duplicate payment, like payment term deviations, like loss discounts, that are classical use cases where our customers realize very quick value. In purchase to pay, there are also accounts payables from the finance side. And on the other side, order to cash or accounts receivables, looking into that process for receiving the money for sales orders and making sure that this is working, the payments are received in time, are working efficient. But then also you have those amazing stories like in the US, we have one customer which has focused on shipped, not billed. So and I was just blown away, saying, okay, they have shipped triple digit millions of products to their customers or distributors, and they have not built those. Can you imagine? I mean, just in that complex organization where they're working with a large network of retailers and wholesales and across their ground infrastructure, they didn't get that transparency of understanding what have I shipped and have I built all those shipments to my customers and have I got all my money? And again, it was process mining. We looked at the process, we screened, saying, okay, where are those things which in the process have gone not the way as they should be, or where there's a gap, or where there's something missing, and where the invoice has not been billed, and then built. We provided the respective action views to the organization to show them on a daily basis. This is a shipment which has not been billed. Just go to that customer and claim your money. And it's been amazing how with an easy, actionable interface, the organization has been enabled to save millions of dollars by just getting that transparency. And very often, Daniel, process mining is about screening processes which are embedded obviously in transactional systems like SAP, Salesforce, Oracle, whatever you have it there, and but then providing the inefficiencies in an easy, digestible manner, providing it to the users where they can see very quickly, oh, all right, this is something which has gone wrong, this is an action which I need to take, this is a customer which I have to call, a supplier which I have to interact with, and then take easy action and work on that. And this is where Process Mining Celonis supports the organization to just bring it on the table on a silver tablet and then take easy action to realize value. Yeah,
great. And obviously with process mining, there's many different stakeholders that need to be involved in the journey. You've got your senior leaders who they're going to be interested in the insights that are coming out of these different processes that we're focusing on. You've got the operational employees or the frontline employees that their processes are now being analyzed and the data's being, I guess, critiqued. And their role may change in the future, because if we can identify how to reduce a process from 40 days to 2 days, well, someone's role is going to change, and maybe not just one person, but many people. So can you talk to us a bit about, I guess, the change management side of process mining, where there are many people that are going to be impacted by this? How do we, as process practitioners, how do we bring these people along the journey so that people understand the value, the why behind it? Why are we doing this? The purpose, and in order so that we get as minimal resistance as possible.
Absolutely, Daniel. And people are at the core here. And as you're saying, it's all about getting the people understand and engaged and supporting what we're doing there. So as you're rightly saying, the first point is explaining why we're doing that. What is the purpose, and giving them an understanding, giving the involvement of the people there in what you're doing there, and giving them also a perspective, saying, it's in many organizations, we just have an open communication saying, well, there's no future for those people who are hitting a purchase button 100 times per day, which is not really a fulfilling task to do for somebody. Just do the same boring thing every day, So it's also about going to people and saying, well, wouldn't it be more meaningful for you if you would have a process mining or execution management system doing that standard PO approval for you, and you have more meaningful work which you can do by looking at exceptions, by getting proactive alerting about things which are not going the way they are, by being provided with insights where you can take exceptional action on that part. So it's very much about communicating with the people. It's very much about involving the people. It's very much about giving people a perspective of saying, okay, what's the evolution of my workplace here, and how can I, if I have an interest, obviously, how can I up-level, upskill, and evolve and emerge myself towards another role? And at Siemens, I've seen the balance there, that on one side, obviously, some people who are not happy to change the standard thing which they are doing, they might not have a future of what they're doing. But on the other side, I've seen many other different roles and jobs which have been created with data analytics, with process automation, with people up-leveling what they are doing. So change is definitely an important part here, to engage the people, to give them the right awareness, to involve them via communities, to excite them, give them new perspectives, inspire them also with things which they can do differently and which they can do much easier. And then if you look at that, also looking forward a bit, it's also now with this amazing topic of ChatGPT, I think there's a whole tremendous new movement coming up there, which again will rock the way how organizations are working and looking at processes. Just imagine at a certain point in time, the users will be able to have an interactive chat bot, where they will talk and say, hey, Celopilot, let's call it Celopilot just for the purpose here. Celopilot, tell me about my process inefficiencies in my organization. And the Celopilot gives you all the list of things which are going wrong and which are going in a different form as they're not supposed to be, And then you can talk with this chatbot in the sense of saying, okay, which of those inefficiencies have the highest negative impact on my efficiency in respect of customer satisfaction, respect of financial impact. List those and prioritize those. And then you can tell the chatbot saying, well, okay, now please, let's take action. So again, I think there's a whole different way how we're going to work in a couple of years. And there, to your initial point of change management, it's important to be open to the people, saying the world is changing, but let's not look at it so much as a threat, but let's look at it as an opportunity. Since if you're open to, work differently in the future, I mean, there's such a broad opportunity which you can do, which you can if you have an open mindset, where you can also evolve in your own role. And there I would always look at it from a positive perspective. And that's where, in respect of change management, we try to support organizations and looking at it rather from the glass being half full than the glass being half empty. So from a positive perspective.
That's great. And would you encourage our listeners as process practitioners, or what would you encourage our listeners to, I guess, start educating themselves on to prepare for this future? I mean, obviously, ChatGPT, it's been wildly popular this year, and many people that were never interested in the artificial intelligence space is all of a sudden are very interested in this space because it has so many different applications. I guess is artificial intelligence one of the spheres that us as process practitioners should be sinking our teeth into and learning and trying to keep up with that, knowing that it's going to be part of the work that we do in the future?
Yeah, I think that huge topic there has a lot of potential. So for process practitioners, for myself and also for my team, my colleague here, we're discussing a lot about what kind of potential this does bring, how this can help us and customers and the whole process community to work differently in the future. And one thing which I was quite blown away by is how Microsoft is piloting on a concept which they call Copilot, where AI will help you in the future to work very differently with Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, since you can interact with telling Word, write a text document of 3 pages about that topic, and then you can tell PowerPoint, make a 5-page PowerPoint presentation on that topic, and have Excel calculate a business case. And why don't we think about a similar form, how we can adopt this to process management in the sense of talking, communicating with the Celopilot and interacting with Celopilot. So I think this is great potential, which the process community, I think, can innovate, think about, and this will be a wide field of potential use cases as one topic there. Another topic which I find very exciting for the process management community is looking into cross-company processes. So far BPM and also process mining is always looking into intra-company, within one company, looking to process efficiency within one company. But wow, what is the potential if you look at cross companies? And here we are currently piloting with some customers where we're looking at customer and suppliers saying, well, if you would have the transparency about those processes cross company, what could you do in respect of automating, in respect of reducing stock, in respect of improving your own processes in collaboration with your partner? So I think modeling those processes and mining those processes and executing those processes in a smarter manner is an exciting topic which has a lot of potential. In that respect, I think we are in an exciting time right now where there's new opportunities coming up. And it's all based on technology improvement. Like 10 years ago when we started with process mining, we didn't really have access to data. Big data wasn't really available. Now it's available and it allows you to have that X-ray based on millions of event logs. With AI evolving, this will be another level where the whole process community can take advantage of technology to turn it into meaningful benefits for business. And that's where I think it's an exciting time which we're at.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And it is a very exciting time. And I think that, as process practitioners, we need to be mindful of what the future looks like to continue to upskill and retrain ourselves so that we can be better prepared for the future. And I know that you work with many organizations we're at Celonis, helping them to embark on that process mining journey. And you're also an author of a book, Process Mining in Action. Can you tell us a little bit about that book? What will our listeners be able to glean from in that book? What should we expect when reading that book?
Yeah, the idea of the Process Mining in Action was to write a book from practitioners for practitioners. And obviously there's lots of academic books and amazing papers which have been developed by Will van der Aalt and others there So my thought in 2020 was to write a book from my perspective as a business practitioner, for business practitioners to understand what is process mining about and how can I use that. And the book consists of 3 parts. The first part is the foundation, in the sense of saying, what is process mining about? What are key success factors for process mining? How can I use process mining? How can I scale process mining across an organization? The second chapter, I was happy to have 12 practitioners from companies like Siemens, BMW, Uber, and Bosch share their operation experiences. And those 12 use cases are all structured in the same manner, saying, what is a challenge? What has been the target of applying process mining? What has been pitfalls and failures? And what has been the value and benefits which has been achieved, which those practitioners then described on 10 to 15 pages. So I think in that book, every peer person interested would find something for purchase to pay, for logistics, for order management, and specific use cases to learn from those practitioners what they've done and how they've been taking advantage of process mining. And the third chapter gives an outlook, saying what's the future of process mining, where I've wrote a couple of pages, and Will van der Aalt kindly also contributed a couple of pages. But to be honest, I think that by today is reality very much. Many of those points which we brought up there is already reality, and probably I have to go back at a certain point in time and rewrite or make a second edition of the book there, with writing some thoughts about the future, and also some thoughts about amazing use cases which our customers have realized in the last 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, the space is evolving so quickly. You would have to write a new book every year, possibly, to keep up with all of the advances.
Maybe one day, I get ChatGPT to write it for me. I mean, that would make it easier, to have a regular update and rewrite of the book there.
100%. But I think the use cases, that's super valuable. It's one thing in theory, but it's another thing to be able to learn and glean from those that are a few steps ahead of you in the process mining journey. They've already encountered those hurdles. They've already encountered those challenges, and they've overcome them. That's really valuable for us as process practitioners to be able to learn from. And as part of the reason why we do this Process Pioneers podcast series is to get real practitioners and people that are putting process management into practice day in and day out in their organization. And, they're the best people that we can learn from. So, but Lars, I just want to thank you for sitting down with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've been taking a lot of notes here, and I'm sure our audience has been gleaning a lot from you as well. So I just want to thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Daniel, thank you so much. It was my honor and pleasure to be part of your Larry King show. And again, I love your show. It's fantastic, and hopefully somewhere soon again I'll have an opportunity to join you. So thank you so much.